Welcome to the Leadmore podcast. I'm your host, John T. Meyer. The Leadmore podcast is the show where we sit down with leaders of today to help inspire and create more leaders for tomorrow. Because I believe the world needs more leaders. And in this episode, one thing I've definitely learned is how this show has followed a little bit my leadership journey. So Leadmore has almost in some ways changed more as I'm thinking through change and we're in, the world is changing now, coming out of this pandemic, still in this pandemic. Just so many things seem to be spinning faster and faster. And the idea of change, of knowing when it's time to move on, of knowing how to choose what's next. So many people are confronting this choice right now. And that's the theme of this episode here as I sat down with Eric McDonald. Eric is the CEO of CoinLion, a cryptocurrency digital exchange. But prior to that, was the founder and CEO of a company called DocuTap. He did DocuTap for almost 20 years. Started in 1999, right out of college, raised venture capital, raised private equity, bought their largest competitor, ended up leaving as CEO. An incredible journey. We talk about that in this podcast, what that meant for him. How did he handle stepping down as CEO and basically becoming unemployed? He'll tell you what he did for about 90 days, which was quite an adventure. And then how he started to filter and think through what's next. He knew he was going to do something again, but how do you decide what that is? And what's the criteria to decide? So something that all leaders have to go through, whether you're rising as a leader, you're changing as a leader, or maybe you're wondering if your time is done as a leader, at least in the current role. Of course, you can always lead. So great conversation with Eric. Good to catch up with him. I think you're going to like the episode. He's very thoughtful. And so here is Eric McDonald. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Leadmore podcast. I'm here with my friend, CEO of CoinLion, Eric McDonald. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on,
Thanks
John.
for coming down.
Yeah, it's good to be
I haven't
here.
seen you for a while, so catch us up briefly. What are you working on right now? Because I know it's not brand new for you, but I haven't seen you since it's been more official. So you got a new focus.
I do. And, today I spend the majority of my time, probably 90% of my time focused on CoinLion, which is in the cryptocurrency space.
Yeah. Did you ever
Super
think
fun.
that would be your future job?
Not at all. In fact, I thought it was only reserved for like the weirdos.
Yep.
And maybe that's an affirmation since I'm there. So no, I never thought that I'd be in that crypto space, and started digging in about a year ago, got really intrigued by it, and yeah, I'm all in there.
Awesome. And we could go a whole nother episode just about crypto.
Yeah.
And especially everything's going on right now with NFTs is crazy. But give us, because I'm convinced it's one of those tidal waves where all these different industries and companies will be created off of the backbone of crypto.
Certainly.
But tell us what part of the ecosystem is CoinLion in?
Yeah, so we're an exchange where you would buy or sell crypto.
Yep.
And there's a number of really big players there, and so we've carved out a niche there. Similar to what I've done in my prior life is find a niche and then just go be great at that one niche. And so the niche is really this auto trading platform where the intent is to buy and sell crypto, buying your dips, sell at the highs.
So like automate the buys and sells.
You got it.
Okay.
Crypto runs 24 hours a day. It doesn't. It's not like Wall Street where you can grab your eggs before it opens up.
Yeah.
So it runs 24 hours a day, and so do these bots.
Interesting. And so you're teaching your account on where you want to buy, where you want to sell.
You got it.
Yep. And what's that team look like today?
It's a team of about 10 people that are spread across the country.
Cool. So we're going to get into sort of what was appealing to you about that idea and that transition. But for someone who doesn't know your story, let's walk back a little bit. You came not from the Midwest originally, but you ended up here because of college, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I grew up outside Seattle.
Yeah.
Went to school here in the Midwest, though. And I've been back in this area for since 2003.
Cool. And if I remember correctly, either at college or shortly after, you had an idea for a business, right?
Yeah, it was about a year out of college.
Okay.
That's when I saw like the handspring and the Palm Pilot. I know, old school. 1999, these small handheld devices, the first of their kind. And I realized that what we now know as like a mobile app, I recognize that as being like, that's the future.
Yeah.
and wanted to go build one. And that's what we did.
Wow. And so what was it about that moment? Was it a doctor, or who had one that you just kind of stumbled into one?
Yeah. I mean, it was way outside of healthcare. And, one of the things that, people have always asked me, like, where do you get these, like, how do you come up with all these ideas?
Mm-hmm.
And they're rarely ever mine. Like, one of the things I feel like I'm really good at is listening to other people's conversations and being like, okay, that's money. Like, we're going to go build that thing.
Yeah.
And so it was a handful of different conversations that led me from just seeing a hardware device where I recognize, okay, this is the future, to, all right, how do you build out an application for physicians that documents the human body? Like that took place over like 6-9 months.
Yeah. And as is often the case, especially with guests on this show, you maybe weren't setting out to be CEO of a company, or didn't think you'd build a company in healthcare.
No, not at all. And in fact, I was actually digging through some old records that my daughter brought by the house, and they were my grades from grade school. And like, I've told people this, like, I was a C student.
Sure, heard you say that. Yeah,
it didn't matter whether it was elementary, whether it was racquetball, college. Like, I was just a C student. So no, I never like graduated college thinking, hey, I'm going to be a CEO of a healthcare tech company.
And was it a person, or just when you saw that Palm Pilot, it was such a huge opportunity that what made you jump?
I love adventure. I love to explore. I love to go figure things out. And so there was this aspect of, boy, I can figure that out. Let's go build an app for that.
Yeah.
And again, this is 1999. It's not what it is today. But I'm like,
you were here in Sioux Falls, right?
I was actually in Phoenix at the time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So even in Phoenix, did you still feel that pull of like the .com boom and
definitely?
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, that was like in the height of the .com era. Definitely thought that I could build this in about 6 months. 20 years later, right? Like it took way longer than I ever expected.
Yeah. Okay. So you see this tablet, and you're thinking, well, I like that line, what, document the human body, which eventually your company DocuTap became a EMR for urgent cares, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Electronic medical record for where we focused out one niche within healthcare, and that was the urgent care.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'm sure you didn't know that exactly you'd end up there, but through conversations and kind of opportunity.
Yeah.
In that space.
No, it took me 3 years to get my first client.
Wow.
Which was in urgent care. And then it took me another 3 years to realize, hey, don't do ortho, ENT, family practice, and urgent care. Like, just go grab one of those and be great at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was a slow learner.
Back to the grades.
That's right.
So let's talk about that for a second, because I think that's a good leadership lesson. That took 3 years to get your first client. How did you not quit?
Yeah. Perseverance has always been one of those things that has been attributed to me, is I'm good at persevering through the hard. And, we almost threw in the towel. I don't know how many times in those early days. And what we do is I'd set out, hey, if I can't achieve X by this date, then we probably need to throw in the towel.
Oh, so you had these little benchmarks.
Every time I'd hit that little benchmark, something would happen, right? And so I don't know, but that's kind of what it takes when you're an entrepreneur, is you have to have just that drive, that you have to push through a lot of that hard.
Yeah. That's crazy and inspiring. So I don't want to gloss over the story, but you're right. 20 years, you get back to Sioux Falls, you continue to hit these benchmarks. It ends up being at its height, a 500-person company, DocuTap. I mean, multiple offices, headquartered in downtown Sioux Falls.
Yeah, we peaked. So today the company's been rebranded Experity.
Yep.
Experity today probably is in that 700 employees. Before we bought our largest competitor, we were probably in that 350 range.
Okay.
So merged the two organizations, also saw tremendous growth post-merger. and they're probably in that 700 to 800 person organization today.
Yeah. And you had some fantastic kind of milestones along the way. I mean, I know you worked with were invested from Bessemer, who's invested in some of the top, biggest global startups in the world. You made an acquisition of another software company. What as you look back on that now that you're not involved, what are you most proud of?
Yeah, Bessemer and Warburg Pincus, those are two different organizations. One's a venture capital. The other one is, private equity. And to be able to have those types of organizations back me is super, super, that's probably something I'm most proud of. And, I can take credit for a little bit of that, but ultimately I know that they bought into me, the vision that we had, but also the team that I had surrounded myself with.
Yeah.
If I didn't have the leadership team that I had with Bessemer, they wouldn't have bit. And the same thing with Warburg.
Sure. That's great. And I imagine I wanted to ask you, this is a leadership podcast, but certainly we talked to a lot of people in the Midwest and South Dakota. I'm sure you've got this question before, but what was unique about starting DocuTap in South Dakota? And maybe what was a challenge of that, right? Being here certainly, I'm guessing Bessemer has no one else in their portfolio in South Dakota.
Yeah, no, that is true. Sioux Falls, South Dakota is a bit unique. It's not like Silicon Valley. It's not. The talent's very different. The capital's very different. You just don't have that ecosystem. And so that made it hard. It made it hard starting up a tech company here in Sioux Falls. It was. What was also unique about it, though, in a positive way, and it took me a little bit to figure this out, but in Sioux Falls, people would come up and they would always want to help.
Sure.
And I was always like, hey, what's your motive? What are you trying to do?
Yeah.
And it took me a while to realize that there's this mentality. There is no hidden motive. And I do believe this community does a great job of this concept of a rising tide lifts all boats. Mm-hmm. When everybody says, hey, this up and coming tech company, we're going to invest into them just emotionally and open doors, do whatever I can. Then this tech company says, man, I love this. How do I put back into the community? That was one of the key reasons why I chose downtown for our office space.
Yeah.
Okay. So what does that do to the community? That was one of the best things I could have done for the community is move our office space downtown.
That's cool.
We had, 350 people there for lunch, breakfast, dinners, drinks. We fed the local community through that. Mm-hmm. So that would not have happened if I didn't have so many people always saying, hey, how do I help you? Yeah. With no agenda.
Yeah. And for better, I think it's a good thing, but that seems to ring true to me because I think DocuTap often gets celebrated as sort of a shining star in terms of your humble beginnings and being out at South Dakota Technology and Business Center, which became Zeal, which is now Startup Sioux Falls. And people are always like, how do we have more DocuTaps, right? And it seems like everybody sort of maybe claimed some of the success, but also it sounds like wanted to help however they could.
It totally did. Yeah, and it was great. And I think that you wouldn't have seen that same community camaraderie in Phoenix.
Sure.
You wouldn't have seen that in Dallas.
Yep.
It would have been much harder to get that same kind of support.
Cool. So, this is where I get to selfishly ask a lot of questions that I want to know in my position, sitting in this chair, because I'm going through sort of a different but similar transition as you did. You have this life-changing exit. You're now a free agent. 20 years at one company. I did 10 here, but 20 is super impressive. And now you're thinking, what the heck do I do with my life, right? I've been a leader of a company. I've been a CEO. Walk me through that. I'm sure it's this high of highs, but then is there a sort of a hangover feeling after all that? Like when post DocuTap, what was it like? Yeah,
definitely an interesting period of my life, the 12 months following when I stepped down at DocuTap. So some of that comes into why did I step down?
Yeah.
And, at some level I can just say, hey, it was the right time.
Yeah.
Part of it was when we went to buy our largest competitor, the CEO said, yeah, I will sell out to you guys, but I have to be the CEO.
Yeah.
And, it was one of these deals where 1 + 1 = 3, like the combination of these organizations is really powerful. And we're seeing that today.
Yeah. Because as I recall, I kind of know since my wife used to work there was no market leader in your space. You guys were the kingpins, but there wasn't maybe one.
Yeah. And so then when you take the two of us,
now
there clearly is. And so like I wasn't going to let my ego step in the way. And when I look at it, I'm like, man, I've been doing this for 19, almost 20 years. I was, I had run this thing way longer than I thought I'd ever,
totally,
And so it seemed like the right choice. And so there's aspects where people are like, man, did you get forced out of your company? And you're like, well, no.
Yeah.
But if I wanted to take that negative lens, I could have been like, yeah, they ran me out. Well, they didn't.
Yeah.
I could have stomped the deal if I wanted to.
Sure.
But I also left the organization in probably the best spot I ever could have. Left it at a high, and that company just continued to grow.
Yeah.
So there's aspects of this where some of that plays into when and how you step down. And then you definitely walk into this, okay, well, what is next?
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that I needed to just take a year off. And I do believe it's a super healthy thing to do. As a man, and I can't speak to women, right? But there's probably some aspect where women may wrestle with this as well. But I started to have this like identity crisis, like, who am I?
Yeah.
And I took a very abnormal path. So I stepped down, and at the time of stepping down as CEO, I was building a home. Mm-hmm. So I'd sold one home, building another. Like, well, what am I going to do here? And one of the options was like travel the world for 90 days. Could have done
sort
that.
of the typical kind of maybe disconnect.
Sure. Well, I chose to live in a tent. So the property that I was building a home on, I had 8 acres, kind of right down by the river, super fun. And I literally started with nothing, ordered these tents and started just building. And it was probably one of the best things I've done. It was a lot of time outside in nature. So it was really good for my soul.
If I remember correctly, when you first posted about this on social media, it was like June, like start of the summer, hot as heck. Humid.
It was super hot, super humid. It was like one of our wettest years. Like when it would rain 2 to 3 inches, like an angry rain.
Yeah.
And it was right by the river. So I'm always worried about just getting flooded out.
Yeah.
But it was good. It was abnormal and not the typical path. But it really kind of forced me to take a step back and just spend time with myself.
Yeah.
Something that we don't always do. And it was really good for me.
And what about that disconnection, do you think? Why was it so needed? Was it just like not looking at your calendar and having it completely empty, no meetings, no, checking your phone, emails, one-on-one? Like, what was about the disconnection that ended up bringing you all this clarity?
I mean, there's a handful of things. Part of it, I had built out a really good leadership team where by the time that I'd stepped down, honestly, they carried 90% of the workload, maybe even more.
Yeah.
I could honestly probably not show up for work for a week and business wouldn't miss a beat. So,
which is good leadership. It's a sign of,
So it was less about emails and texts and more about you're just sitting here around a campfire and like you're not going to work. And so I remember going to a few events and people would ask like, what do you do?
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm homeless actually. Unemployed and homeless.
Yeah.
And they
joke,
would just,
but not terribly wrong.
You're right. Like, yeah, exactly. And they would chuckle and be like, no, seriously. And I'm like, no, yeah, seriously. I live in a tent.
Yeah.
And so there was this humbling. It was super humbling for me to just live in a tent. Had to figure out where I'm going to wash my clothes. I went down and took all my clothes to the laundromat. I engaged in like interesting conversations at the laundromat.
Yeah.
Where am I gonna, like, I remember one time I needed to get clean for an event. And I'm like, well, like, how do I do this? I got mud everywhere. And every time like I touch something, like it just gets muddy. Yeah. These are things that there are a lot of people like this is their day to day. And the more we remove ourselves, the more wealth that you create, you have to remove yourself from the hardships.
Sure.
If I want to keep something cool, I can keep it cool for about 48 hours. I don't have a fridge, like nothing's plugged in. And I did have a little bit of solar power, but not enough to run a fridge.
Yeah.
These are challenges that they were good for me.
Yeah.
At a time when I really kind of had two paths. One is, travel the world, or kind of hunker down in nature. Mm-hmm. So it was good for me.
That's really interesting. And I don't know if I can get Paige to go for the tent part of it, but I can relate to the feeling of, when people are like, what are you doing now? And in my case with Lemonly, I don't have a plan. Like I made this like you kind of the one, I think this is a 1 + 1 = 3 situation. But there is no strategy. And I think I can tell when I say that they don't believe me. There's sort of this sense of like, oh, but for real, like, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know, like TBD. I'm going to figure that out. So like, again, selfishly, I'm curious to hear how that process went through.
Yeah. And what I really almost felt the pressure to do was to start backing into some dates and be like, okay, if I set a year, and let's just say that it took 6 months to line something good up, actually something really good is going to take about maybe a year.
Yeah.
So actually, I should start having conversations now.
Yeah, you had pressure. Yeah.
And so it was hard to basically say, listen, I'm not going to have any conversations for 9 months. I'm not. That was hard to do because, again, we want to plan.
Yep.
And we get nervous about, well, what if? And there was definitely this feeling of, what if I'm a one-trick pony? What if I could do DocuTap once and that's it? Like, I got I can't do it again.
Yeah, I can relate to that so much.
And that was a huge fear. And even as I'm starting something new, there's probably always that fear too. What if I fail? Mm-hmm. And I think people look at you and like, dude, like, how do you wrestle with the idea of failure? Like, you've already been successful, but it's still an area that I wrestle with. Can I be successful again?
Yeah. Yeah. We all have that inside of us. Right. And then we're driven by so many different things, but certainly the desire to prove people wrong, to achieve something difficult, to prove yourself that you can do it. Those are powerful forces. So let's talk about it. You get through the camping phase, you move into your new house. When you did start taking conversations, what was your criteria? And I guess kind of the theme of this episode I think of is leaders who might be in transition, right? And what was your criteria to start taking flyers or opportunities or coffees, or did you write down next to the campfire like your must-haves, or did you just say, I'm going to go with open mind to everything?
I really did have an open mind, and there was a few times where something intrigued me. I knew it wasn't going to be long-term at all, but I'm like, hey, I'll kind of poke at this a little bit.
Sure.
And, I had different categories. So a number of private equity individuals reached out and just said, hey, would you be willing to engage on a project like this or that short term? So it gave me a chance to kind of explore some stuff, which was great. It also validated, well, I'm not going to do this. Like, this is not going to be a good option. So one of those, for example, was helping do a couple acquisitions. And so I basically, was a slave to these guys for like 3 weeks as they were looking to buy these companies. They're like, hey, I need you on 5 phone calls tomorrow
Due
for 2
diligence
hours.
type stuff. Yeah.
Super, super time consuming. So while it sounds fun and I'm a huge value add in that healthcare tech space, I realized pretty quick, well, that's not something I'm going to do. So some of this was a little bit of trial and error, but I did. I went in with a very open mind. But I also knew by and large, I'm always going to be tech focused. And so I ended up landing on probably about 3 to 4 different companies that were all tech minded. Mm-hmm. So one of those was Journey Teller. Mm-hmm. And Journey Teller is a company I'm still involved with, helping out on a regular basis.
Cool.
Real fun tech play for businesses, right?
Yep.
Then you've got Phrase AI, which is a artificial intelligence, machine learning concept for healthcare. Okay. Specifically around like conversation-based AI. So it'll essentially listen to the conversation between a physician and a patient.
Cool.
And then extract the things that need to go in a medical record. So overlaps well with my prior life.
Yeah, I was going to say.
And then CoinLion, being in that crypto space. So those are kind of the three that I'm still actively involved in that bubbled up to the surface at the end of my year.
Okay. So you waited most of the whole year before you really...
I did. The CoinLion, I committed to those guys a little bit early, and I just said, hey, I'm going to sit on your board. I'll kind of help you guys out.
Yep.
That one didn't turn into a kind of a full engagement, though, until I'll just call it a year ago.
Okay.
So that was a 15 months post stepping down from DocuTap.
Yep. And ultimately, that's the one you decided at least put your name on the business card for. And so we'll talk about that. What was it about that? I've heard you say, I think it's to me or in an article, or that you think this is, what was it, 10x the potential of DocuTap, or like it has some chance to be a huge thing. Why do you feel that way?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be one of two things. It's either going to be a belly flop, right?
Sure.
Or it has the ability to 10x. And, part of that is how it has the ability to scale versus how I scaled things at DocuTap.
Sure.
The sales cycle at DocuTap was fairly long. Like it took a while to market to these guys. And once you start selling them, it was 6 months, 9 months to get them sold.
Yeah, they're changing their whole practice and operations.
And then once they sign the contract, it would take you 4 to 6 months to get them installed. Once it's installed, you have to...
training, onboarding.
Yeah. Well, then they start using it for 30 days before you can send an invoice.
Sure.
Then you send the invoice and they'll, pay it on day 60 or 90.
Yeah.
I mean, so you're looking at about a year and a half by the time you start seeing revenue.
Yeah.
In this new world, people can deposit cash the same day you talk to them and start generating revenue like within 48 hours.
Yeah.
And
once you get going, some of these people you won't even talk to.
No,
I'll just
you're
land
right.
on the page and sign up.
You got it.
Yeah.
So from a scalability perspective, CoinLion has the ability to scale. I mean, significantly faster than DocuTap.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, with a much smaller team as well.
And I feel like I'm doing it again from all the people that did it to you 20 years ago, but it's hard to not say, well, crypto in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, like, do we have that talent? But maybe in your case, it doesn't matter anymore. It's all over.
Yeah, it is really helpful to have a team that's spread out all over. I can grab people that are uber talented, but you're in the same. You're right. People were like, healthcare technology, DocuTap in Sioux Falls, like that can't work.
Yeah.
We did, and we did it really well.
Yep.
So yeah, I totally believe we can. Doesn't matter where you're at. What is nice though is that at some level, when you get to the root and you say like, okay, crypto, who is that governed by? Is there a governing body that CoinLion has to kind of adhere to? It's not the SEC. It's that banking world, and so we're treated more like a bank. Oh, what is South Dakota known for?
Sure.
There's a lot of financial institutions based out of South Dakota.
A lot of money moves through the state. Yep.
You got it. And so there are some reasons why it makes sense for us to be based here, and there's talent here that understands that world. Maybe not necessarily crypto, but the money transmitter license is needed for every state, et cetera. Like those are some commonly known things here.
I'm curious what some of those local conversations are like, because sort of the ethos of crypto is all kind of anti-bank, right? Decentralization, right? We don't want to have any one person or entity in charge of our money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You getting a lot of pushback from those conversations?
Well, some of the local banks that have roots from the area, they've been great at reaching out saying, hey, can you come educate us, help us understand this? So maybe 2 or 3 years ago, the leaders of those organizations were like, whatever, crypto's never going to be here.
Yeah.
Now they're like, all right, it's clearly going to have a presence and it's not going away. How do we play ball? Mm-hmm. So those have been fun conversations to have, that not adversarial at all. Mm-hmm. So looking forward to having more of those. In fact, I just had a conversation like 2 days ago about, hey, how do we, actually impact the financial institutions in the area through healthy crypto conversation.
That's cool. Yeah, that's how it feels so different in 21. 17 was sort of this like get rich quick, kind of like scammy. There was a lot of altcoins, people not knowing what was going on. But yeah, it's very clear. I'm a big believer in it.
So this morning, just doing some tidying up on business stuff, I needed to move $200,000 from one organization to another organization to a third organization. So moving $200,000 from essentially 3 different organizations.
Yeah.
It's able to do that. Yeah.
That would take
I know.
weeks.
Yeah. I did that in under 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And you literally message somebody, you're like, hey, can you move 200,000 from this to this account? They're just like, boom, boom. Right. And then we do it one more time.
Yeah.
And so it's super cool to see the power of crypto. And so this wasn't Bitcoin. It was a stable coin, but it was one of the ways in which we're transferring funds around.
Yeah.
Super fast, super secure.
Cool. I like it. Well, like I said, we could do a whole nother podcast about crypto, but I do want to ask you, is your playbook different this time around? Meaning, like, as a CEO, as a leader, do you look at DocuTap and think, okay, I did a lot of things right, but also these are 3 things I'm going to do differently? I mean, I even know, like, you're bringing some, you're working with Dusty again, or like bringing some of the gang back together.
Yeah.
I'm curious, how do you look back and be like, these things I want to do more of, these things I think as a leader I need to change my style?
I definitely was able to bring a lot of things from DocuTap. So got plenty of wounds, plenty of scars that you're like, okay, let's not do that again. The biggest one right now is how do you build revenue as fast as possible versus staying in that R&D world way too long.
Okay.
And it's super easy to do as a tech person because like, hey, we need to create perfection first. And instead, just get something out there. Get something that people can start playing with. And then you keep fine-tuning it, making it better and better. It took me a long time to kind of realize that or figure that out.
Sure.
And then, pulling somebody like Dusty. Dusty was an amazing leader at DocuTap who his playbook for operations and marketing, product also changed dramatically over the years. So have him by my side going through this has been just phenomenal. Cool. Whereas I didn't have that in my first 10 years. I didn't have people that were by my side that had already been there and done this multiple times.
Yeah, that's powerful for trust and know-how. And,
Yep.
Yeah. That's cool. Cool. I like that. Well, I guess maybe the closing thought, and then we'll finish with a little bit of rapid fire on you as a person. If someone's listening, was there, both in your deciding to exit, but then also in this kind of transition period, and then of course the finally choosing CoinLion, what have you learned about yourself as a leader, whether it be your the criteria, the must-haves? I know that your self-awareness of your strengths and weaknesses. I guess how do you feel differently about yourself than maybe 2 years ago before this journey started?
We go through just different phases in life. We go through these phases where when we're in our 20s and 30s, we really kind of have to build our career really hard. And in hindsight, I know I had to do that. For me, there isn't the same value on creating wealth and value, not at the expense of relationships. And so, it's easy to look at all of my successes and not look at some of the relational impacts that I had there. And in hindsight, it's like, hey, all right, I'm not willing to make those same mistakes moving forward in life. So I'm running at a different pace, and the leadership team at CoinLion knows that they've got an awesome leader, but I'm also not going to burn myself out or destroy relationships in the process.
Yeah. Because you would probably say maybe there was a cost to building DocuTap.
There was absolutely a cost to build DocuTap.
Yeah. Personally, professionally, all of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Probably more on the personal side.
Yeah.
Personal relationships, it's really hard to invest into those personal relationships in a healthy way and build a startup tech company that's going to grow, at Mach 3.
Yeah, that's so true. And I also think everything we've talked about these last, 25 minutes about change and your camping period, and then you throw this pandemic on top, and a lot of what you're saying, I think people have had a reset of sort of like what matters most to them.
Yep.
So that came at an interesting time too, when you were in this transition, I imagine.
Yeah, it definitely did. And it further validated the need for personal relationships and just, hey, like, what are you what's the expense of our decisions, whether it's building a business, like DocuTap or CoinLion.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then now, like, maybe 2 years ago, you say, yeah, we have employees all over the world. We're like, does that work? And of course it works. Yeah, we've all just been doing it.
Yep.
So that's great. Awesome. Let's finish with a few just kind of about you and what makes you tick. So I don't know if you're a big reader or not, but is there a book that you always recommend to people, a book that you would tell the listeners to listen to?
What's funny is I'm not a huge reader. And people have just given me a hard time over the years that, they say that the average CEO reads 50 books a year, and I read like 2. But
if they're impactful, that's all that matters.
Yeah, no, there's a recent book that I've gotten into that's focused on listening, and it's such a good book. And I'm trying to grab it here for you. It's called "You're Not Listening" by Kate Murphy.
Okay.
And it's one that I think like every human needs to read.
Interesting.
And I mean, the premise is like, how do we like stop trying to like, how do we truly listen to what's going on the other side of the table?
That's good.
Amazing book.
Good for leaders, good for everyone, like you said.
Yeah. Relationships, just anybody in your life that you have a relationship with, hey, listen to them. Versus trying to create a rebuttal as soon as you hear something.
You're already thinking about what to say. Oh. Yeah, totally. What's your superpower? What do you think you do best?
I would say I'm really good at hearing other people's ideas and then executing on their ideas.
Sure.
Very, very, very rarely is it my idea. They're other people's ideas. I'm just good at executing on them.
Yeah, and being okay with that. That's, I mean, the ideas are pretty cheap, right? Until they get brought into reality.
Yeah, and like that's one of the things I realized early on is everybody's got a great idea. Everybody does. Mm-hmm. But the number of people that can actually execute on those ideas, very few.
Yeah, that's good. I like to say that parents are absolutely leaders, and we certainly need great parents in our life to lead the next generation. Piece of parenting advice. I know you have one going off to college next week, you said.
Yeah, my oldest goes to Baylor next week.
Exciting.
Super excited. So I've got 5 kids, 19 down to 9. And so you would think that I've got it all figured out, and I don't. I think that it's really easy for us as parents to get wrapped around kind of the short term and lose sight of the long-term heart. Like, how do I capture the heart of my kids? I'm not here to be the best friend, right? Like, I'm not going to do this through just like showering gifts on them, but like, how do I win their heart? And so there was an incident with my son who I've got awesome kids, right? And I realized, hey, I need to invest some more time into this kid. And so what do we do when there's I don't want to call it a crisis, but an issue?
Sure.
Yeah. Well, I double down and spend more time. Hey, all right, cool. We're going out for the night, just you and me.
Yeah.
Now, my natural reaction is, dude, you're grounded and you're getting a whooping. Like I didn't grow up in the era of you're in timeout. Like you're getting a whooping, kid.
Yeah.
Well, that's my natural instinct versus, all right, no, I need to invest more time into this kid and get after his heart. And so there's times where it's easy to blame our kids, and there's times where it's like, hey, on this, a little bit's on me as a parent.
Yep.
That I didn't know was going on in my kid's life. I should have known.
So is it like unfiltered time? Is that the best answer to get at the heart?
Unfiltered time, quality time. And when you've got 5 kids, it's easy for all the kids to just kind of do their own deal. And so one-on-one time. And so, timing worked out perfect. I didn't have the other kids, that night. So it was just he and I. Cool. We're just going to go spend, more time together.
Love it. I like that. And then lastly, I'd like to know the leaders that inspired you, whether it be teachers or coworkers or just people you've even studied.
I don't know that I have any one leader that kind of came to mind. What I would say is that I had these great mentors along the way that would last for about 2 years.
Okay.
And there was always a time where I ended up outgrowing them. And I think there's probably mentors in life that they mentor you your whole life. I think there's times where people are just there for a season.
Yeah.
And the mentor that I needed when I had 20 to 50 employees was different than when I was backed by venture capital.
Sure.
When I was backed by private equity, it was a different one. when I'm camping and I'm trying to get after my heart, it's a different type of mentor. And so I think the thing that I've encouraged people the most is be okay with mentors coming and going, and know that you're going to have different seasons of your life and you need to find them for your current season.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Did you seek them, or did they just sort of appear when those different seasons arose?
It's both.
Yeah.
When you have your eyes open and you're asking or you're praying for it, they'll show up.
Cool.
But if you're never thinking about it, it's funny, they don't show up, right?
Yeah.
And so when you have your eyes open, you're looking for it and you're asking people, they're probably at arm's length. They're not far away.
Yeah, just be aware.
Yep.
This is great, Eric. Thanks so much for coming down.
100%.
It's great to catch up. Take care.
Thanks.
All right, everyone. That was the episode with Eric McDonald, CEO of CoinLion. Thanks, Eric, for coming on. Great to catch up. Thanks to you for listening to another edition of Leadmore. Remember, we drop episodes every Thursday wherever you subscribe to podcasts. So you can find them on Spotify. You can find them on iTunes. You can find them right on www.leadmorepodcast.com. So thank you. Subscribe, click follow, give us a review. Thank you so much. Take care and be well.